This episode is sponsored by Saigon Podcast Studio, premium podcast recording space right in the heart of District 1 Saigon. Whether you're launching your first show, recording interviews, or creating professional audio and video content, Saigon Podcast Studio gives you the space, equipment, and support to sound and look your best. Come by for a free tour of the studio and see where your next great episode could be recorded. The link is in the show notes. Francesca, we're going to start every episode like we do with the rapid fire openers, quick answers, just very brief. Number one, what is the best content marketing advice you've ever been given?
Okay, it comes from a filmmaker actually, and was to write the core of a storytelling in the white space of a matchbox.
What's the worst piece of content marketing advice you've ever been given?
Just think a strategy just in terms of numbers.
What's the one metric that you actually care about?
The coherence and the clarity when you talk about your business, about what you do, and the authenticity.
What's one piece of content marketing advice for somebody starting from zero next week?
Find your unique selling point that makes the difference from you to others content creator.
And podcasts, great for content marketing. Why or why not?
Great if you are able to manage it. If you're not, it's the worst idea you can have.
I love that. And that's absolutely perfect. It's why we exist at 7 Million Bikes Podcast. And it's something we talk to people about a lot as well. A lot of people want to start a podcast. And when I explain to them what actually goes into it, they often are like, oh no, we don't want to do that. Or not just the time, because it takes a lot of time, or the cost as well. Like, if you want to create this, it's going to cost you either X amount of money, not a huge amount, but it's going to cost you X amount of money, or it's going to cost you X amount of time. And for a lot of people, they can't do that. So I absolutely love that answer. Francesca, you were a journalist and an editor at Italy's first and oldest newspaper. What is something that a journalist knows about storytelling that a marketer doesn't?
Two things. Finding the angle, because when you write a news, you can write the same thing, but in a different perspective. So the angle is something I was struggling for a long time when I was writing for La Nazione, and it's something I learned. And I learned also in the journalism school of Paris, because they take care of the angle. So it's one of the things that's the most important and makes the difference. The other one is bringing out the real story that nobody tells about. Because normally when you interview someone, they already have a story in their mind. They already know what to tell. But the most important thing for me and the most important thing for a journalist is bring out what they normally don't tell.
Can you give me an example of how you've used that in marketing, or how you've seen that being used in marketing?
Like, for example, if it talks about a story of a small company just born, or also a old company, they always have a story. They tell their story in terms of numbers. So I was born in 1883. We were two brothers, and then we grew up, and we have now 10 salary, and now we have 10 years old story. So that's the normal story you listen to. But for example, if you talk with a business owner, for example, I don't know, he has a bar, a coffee shop, and they tell you the normal story, but nobody tells you why they decided to do that business instead of something else. So why you open a coffee instead, or I don't know, a shop close. So the story behind is the one who makes you feel alive when you listen to this story, and you have something to learn, because there is always a difficult, there is always a problem that someone was trying to resolve, a personal problem that became their business at the end.
And that's that Simon Sinek, that was his TED talk, or his talk that blew up, right? He talked about the why.
Yeah, that's one of the part I use in my in my strategy. Actually, yeah, the why is the strongest part of a brand, because if you know very well your reason why, you can arrive directly to your target audience.
And if you're listening right now, I'm sure someone is thinking the same as me. They're like, what is my why? And I'm thinking right now, why did I start this? Why do I do what I do?
Yeah.
And it is something I think I maybe need to sit down and have a good think about.
in terms of why, there is the why you show to the others and the why that is behind. Because there is always a visible goal,
Mm.
but inner goal also. And that's the most important part, because the inner goal is the thing that is connected to your target audience, because inside they have the same feeling of you.
How do you come up with a genuine why? Because I think if you were to ask me right now, why do you do what you do?
Yeah.
Why do you create podcasts? I could come up with a generic answer like, oh, I love sharing stories. I love, sharing stories. That would be the generic answer.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is my real why. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, I love sharing stories. I love the medium of podcast. I love being able to put on your headphones and listen to an interview or a story. So, I mean, maybe I do love storytelling. I'm not sure. Like, how do you figure out your why?
Well, your personal why is what's the benefit you have at the end of the day by doing what you do. Like, for example, if I talk in terms of my personal why, I help others to be invisible because I like to be visible too. So at the end of the day, I helped other, but at the same time, I was visible to them. So that's the personal why. And I have a benefit also.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's difficult not to just say, well, I just want to make money.
Yeah, it's coherent and it's honest 100%. Of
Because
course.
I think I obviously want to make money doing what I do, but if my real goal was to make money, I would have chosen a different path.
Well, maybe you want to make money, but there is something else inside you
Mm.
that you want. Al- Also, not just making money.
Yeah.
But if you were my client, I will take 2 sessions to talk about your story, and from your story, for sure, you bring out your real
Mm.
goal.
So you're from Italy, worked for the oldest Italian newspaper. What do you notice are the biggest differences between the way Italian brands and Vietnamese brands tell stories?
Okay, there is a huge difference because at the moment, what I can see from Vietnamese brand is that they're mostly oriented on the performance, on the content, and they try to, I don't want to use this word, but it's kind of copy other strategies instead of bringing out their true voice. Instead, the Italian brand are moving more and more in the direction of the authenticity and the storytelling, the personal storytelling. So the difference is that you have a, in Italy, brand with a long story and a story that is told. In Vietnam, you find very good viral content, and in Vietnam, they're very good on making content, on video editing, on video making. Very good, they're excellent, and they go viral easily. But maybe sometimes they miss the content, the true content. So how do you make the difference between a huge quantity of brand, because in Vietnam there are so many new brands?
I saw something recently about this. Someone posted a video that they made, and the comments were like, technically, this is perfect, but I don't really understand the point of it. And I
Yeah,
think, is that what you,
yeah,
you kind of
yeah,
mean? It's interesting. You mentioned a word that has come up actually time and time again on this podcast and on other from other conversations was authenticity. And we talked about that. Right now, Tay is here walking around. Nobody will be able to see him on the main cameras that we're talking on right now. He's taking behind the scenes footage. Say hello, Tay. And we're doing that because we want to create authentic content,
yeah,
not just
yeah,
this content
great.
that looks perfect. The lighting's all done. We spend a lot of time setting all this up, making sure the camera's ISO is set perfectly, that we know the number on the lights, all of this stuff. But we're trying to, and it's something that I've talked about before. It's difficult for me because I like to do that kind of fake it till you make it thing or promote yourself. Like, look how amazing this is.
Yeah,
And it's only been recently through these conversations that I'm like, okay, well, let's try and share more of the authentic self of the studio and myself. I've shared some stuff about my health problems, about some financial challenges that I've had in the past being here in Vietnam that before I would never do that. But now it's like, okay, let's just be a little bit real. Let's be a little bit authentic. And we've not been doing it long enough to see the difference, but I think I can feel it's going to make a big difference.
yeah, you have an interesting story.
I hope so. I think so. And as I was saying to you before, everything in the studio took so much effort,
Yeah,
you know. So even you won't be able to see it on these cameras right now. Do you see that? the power surge there, the surge protector, the big white box. When we first moved into the studio, I ran out and I bought a whole bunch of surge protectors, like what do you call them? Like power outlets?
You're asking to the wrong person.
No, I can't even think of the name.
I'm
But you
Italian.
can plug multiple
Yeah.
plugs in, right? So I ran out. I wanted everything set up on the first day, and they were about 100,000 dong each, so about $4 each.
Uh,
Then, as I using my friend ChatGPT, I realized that cheap is not good, and it
yeah.
could make these expensive lights and the expensive cameras. It could break them if we have a surge of power, which could happen with lightning and things like this in Vietnam and Saigon. And so I was like, shit. So even something as simple as that surge protector there, that was about 900,000 dong or something like that. And it was
Mm.
really difficult to find. So this is again just going back to we want to share more of the authentic self of the authentic story. Like this all looks relatively simple, not simple at all.
No, it's not.
Yeah. You wrote for Le Podcast Journal back in 2017 in Paris. Now, where do podcasts fit for brands that are now trying to build trust and that authenticity?
Okay, it's a very different kind of language, the podcast, because it exposes you more than other languages, if you think about it. Writing news is something written, writing a post is something written. Like a picture could be built, but a podcast, you have to manage an interaction with someone else and you have to manage your voice. So by your voice, people can understand where do you have authority, where you have less clarity, where you feel the emotion. So it's the best way to be connected in a direct way with your target audience. And it's very intimate because normally people listen to the podcast when they do other things, under the shower, for example, or driving. So they're in their intimacy, but they listen to you. So it's a direct way to contact people.
I literally listen while I shave. I was shaving this morning and I make sure always to put a podcast on. So yeah, for 100%. And talking about the trust in the voice, how do you build trust through your voice?
Well, that's very hard question, but it's interesting because I think that the way you can build trust is being authentic as most possible. Because now, for example, okay, I'm trying to manage my voice, which is not easy for
I've
me.
made you think about it more now
Yeah,
that I've asked
yeah,
the
because
question.
I'm thinking in a different language, and I'm thinking how to don't translate my voice in a robot voice, in a fake voice, because I want to bring out my message, and I would like to connect with you. Okay, so it's important that you are in contact with your deep voice, and your deep voice doesn't come from your throat, but from your belly. So it's important that you feel, now I'm trying to feel your body and the way that the voice comes out from inside. And what you say comes out spontaneously. Is that correct word? Yeah.
Spontaneous, yeah.
Yeah. Instead, if I'm focused on my mind about thinking about the perfect answer, I start feel the difference. Now I'm talking with my throat, and I don't have I do no sense. So that's the way you should manage voice, I think.
So when you're working with Vietnamese brands or Vietnamese people, what are some of the things you notice and what are some of the things you help coach them on to help improve their voice?
Okay, what I notice is exactly what I was saying. Culturally, I think the Vietnamese language use mostly the mouth
Mm.
to speak, and the voice stops here. But even they have a very deep sound and very deep tones, so sometimes it comes out from, of course, from the belly. But when they are too much focused on the performance, they stop to have this connection. So one of the things I notice is, and I notice mostly in the women, they block. They're like disconnected. Yeah, they're in the mind. So what I do for help them is find again the connection for with the rest of the body.
One of the things I've noticed, I'm not sure if this is the exact same as voice, but one of the things I've noticed working with Vietnamese brands and Vietnamese businesses is they love a script. And going back to talking about being authentic, sometimes we've been recording a podcast and I kind of have to keep saying to them, like, don't worry about the script. Like, this, like, this is your field of expertise, just talk. And I've noticed it time and time again. I don't know if it's part of the education of, rote and repeat, like learning things on the blackboard and then you just repeat it. They love to get a script and follow it, and it becomes so inauthentic. And I found that as a bit of a challenge is to try and coach people to be like, just talk
Mm.
authentically, just be yourself, which is terrible advice. Be yourself. I say that because I've hated that when someone says, "You just be natural." That's why I'm laughing at that. Yeah.
Actually, this is a problem not just for Vietnamese, because also Italian
Oh,
people,
really?
yeah, has this problem. Yeah, me too. I was one of these because when you start talking about yourself, you're scared because you show parts of you that you want normally hide. You're used to talk about others, especially if your work is storytelling for others,
Mm.
but not about you. So when you're exposed, you wanna be perfect. You have fear of judgment. You fear what the other thinks about you or what you say, or if you say something that can trigger others in a worse way. So normally, yeah, I saw often during interview and working for the newspaper, many people that were reading something already prepared, and it was just an interview, not with camera. I was just writing and then writing again.
Mm.
So I think is a fear that is common for many person, fear of exposure.
You moved to Saigon in 2025 and you brought your business, Albedo, with you.
Hmm.
And you've been teasing for a while now that you're going to be doing a project with a big fashion brand, Anmia. What does an Italian brand strategist bring to a Vietnamese fashion brand?
That's a very specific question and a very specific case actually, because they're not clients for brand strategy actually. And there is an interesting story with Anmir because I met them, the founder and the co-founder, last year, just 2 weeks before I left Vietnam to come back to Italy. And I was looking for a designer for one of my projects, was called Volcano, and is a personal brand for women. And they were looking for a model because they wanted to express the idea of freedom, of strength, and of fun on wearing their clothes. And they were working with model. They have been working with model per different years, but they never found that kind of language. So they recognized that I was used to be a model, and I posed for them for one entire collection. And I was expressing that kind of idea of freedom, of fun, and of or strength. Okay, so that's a different way to communicate a brand because I'm their brand ambassador. So it's another thing is connected to Albedo, and is the way that you communicate a brand through your body. And that's the entry point of the personal branding project I bring with me for women, that starts from body and finish with a personal brand.
On that, what is the biggest difference between how an Italian brand and a Vietnamese brand tells the story?
Okay, an Italian brand is focused on the story of the brand itself. So now we're moving more on the direction of authenticity. And I don't like using this word because now everybody uses the authenticity word, But that's the direction we're going to, because there are many contents. And so that's the way we make the difference. And we go in the direction of the story, the authentic story behind. The Vietnamese, they go mostly in the direction of comedy, because I see many content are comedy or aesthetic, very aesthetic. They do entertainment, so they're very good on entertainment and creating viral content. That's, I think, is the big difference.
I know for a brand I worked here before, a big company. I remember one time we had a meeting with the marketing department and they said, "Oh, we're gonna make a viral video." And I was kind of like, it's not really that simple to just
Yeah,
make a viral video. A video goes viral. There's
yeah,
probably plenty of videos that you will make that won't go viral. But
yeah.
what are you seeing Vietnamese brands do that is helping create viral content?
First, they use a different platform because they on TikTok.
Hmm.
So on TikTok, the algorithm is different and it's easier to be viral. I went viral with the very stupid content, and the content I created 1.5 years ago, and is still working. Is still creating engagement and new followers. You know what? And the weird thing is that it's something I just shot in 3 seconds, and I posted.
I've seen some
Yes.
TikTok videos that have gone viral, and it millions of views, and I watch it and I'm like, how has this gone
Yeah.
viral? It seems not like that big a deal.
Yeah, they go viral on TikTok, of course, because they're good on creating like aesthetic things, funny things, and it's just entertainment.
Mm.
And they look for entertainment because I think that's my idea. When they watch the phone, they just want to stop from the chaos of the city. So that's why they go viral easily. The same content in Italy maybe doesn't work because in Italy we look for something that leaves you a lesson or the idea of learning something. So that's my idea. And they go viral with, yeah, with very simple content.
You mentioned there that the algorithm
Yeah.
and it's different for TikTok. For you, from your understanding, what works best on TikTok for the algorithm? Because we're all slaves to the algorithm. What works in Vietnam? You mentioned comedy. Like, how
Mm.
does that? How do they do that?
How do they find the right content to become viral?
Yeah, yeah.
I think because they observe the others and they try to emulate the others. So if you scroll and you watch Vietnamese content, they all fun. They I don't know, they do joke about the Vietnamese food, about the Vietnamese grab, about the Vietnamese chill. If you scroll on TikTok, the content are very similar, and there are many foreigners that emulate the Vietnamese content because they want followers from Vietnam. So I think is yeah, they go viral because they follow trends. And yeah, we can see trends also. I remember last year when the metro was opening in Vietnam, there were many TikToker shooting video and picture in the metro, and that were content viral on TikTok. So they follow some trends first thing, and they find things that are light, not very engaging, not too much heavy, because TikTok wants something that is just smart and fast.
I remember when the metro opened, there was the
Yeah.
stairway, and it was just crazy. There was just people everywhere dressed up, like men, women, in fashionable clothes, all taking pictures. I was just eating my McDonald's. It was at the Vincom Town Mall, and we were just watching all these people taking all this content. I was like, it's pretty cool. You're like, it's a big deal. The metro just opened here. Like, it
Yeah.
took long enough. So that was pretty cool. We've also seen a lot of our content blow up on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. We literally had a video recently, forgot, it might be more than 500,000 now. The last time I looked at it, over 400,000 views on Facebook alone. And then not as well as it on Instagram and TikTok, but we've also had videos have massive virality,
Mhm.
many, many views, and taking clips from the podcasts. And that's one thing that we try and tell people is when you create a podcast with us, it's not just a podcast. A lot of people think of it as just being the audio only, but we're saying when you create it, it spans many, many different medias, different content. So you have the audio, the video on YouTube, you can create a blog post, but then these short form clips, you literally can reach millions and millions of people. If a Vietnamese brand came to you and they said, we're thinking of starting a podcast, what would you tell them?
I will start from their unique selling point because is that makes the difference. And based on the unique selling point, I will study the competitors because if there are any competitors that manage a similar podcast, of course you have to find a different positioning. And based on unique selling point, I will build like a series of 10 episodes that you can manage that has a coherent storytelling from each one episode just to bring out a real content, something that I can listen in the morning and I can appreciate because the podcast in my mind the podcast is like reading an article or a newspaper article, but you do while you're doing something else. And so when you read something, you want to learn something. So you have to share something which was interesting. And the most easier way to share interesting content is being close to a unique selling point, your core business actually.
So for Saigon Podcast Studio, what do you think off the top of your head is our unique selling point?
The first thing I notice is that as a foreigner, you approach to Vietnamese marketing and content based on a foreigner point of view, which I think is interesting for a Vietnamese target audience because you offer a different perspective. That's the thing that I noticed first. But I would like to go deeper to understand what's the other unique selling points that you have, because for sure you have you have more than this.
Albedo, your brand, is named after a physics term which is about the amount of light that is reflected off a surface. I love that. And your strategy follows archetypes. For a small business owner in Saigon, what does that look like in practice?
First, I start from the concept itself, because the idea of comparing the albedo with the client is in terms of how much potential have a surface to reflect the light. So it's the same is applied to a client. Okay. When I start a path with with a client, is definitely a path of the 10 session. I first listen to their story. So I take at least 1 or 2 sessions to just listen their story. It's like a journalistic interview, because I want to hear everything, and I want to bring out, as I told before, the real story they're not used to tell. And after this, we work on the golden circle. So we build a mission, vision, values, and based on this, we work with a competitor studying, positioning, and just after this, we have a archetype test, which is different. It's different if you are a company. I have a specific archetype test based on Carl Jung archetypes. If you are a personal brand, I have 3 wheels of archetypes. So one is a Carl Jung, one of a Titan, and one of goddess for women and god for men. And that's the test that help to understand better how the angle of the angle of your personality if you're a personal brand, of your company if you're a company. So based on the archetype, we can choose easily all the visual. That means creating a mood board, choosing a palette of color, and then building a storytelling based on the story that you told before and on the story that we work later on a second moment. So it's an entire path that is created to bring out your real story. And when you have a clear idea about your archetype, it's easier for you to tell your story, because there are some traits that are common from the client and the archetype they choose. So when you have a clear idea about your archetype, is easier to communicate your brand or your personal brand.
And I remember we talked about this the first time we met about Nike. So explain a little bit,
Yeah.
what is the Nike archetype and
Yeah.
how do they use that?
Okay, so the Nike archetype is based on the hero archetype and is one of the Carl Jung archetypes, and basically is connected to what are the target audience that identify himself with a hero. They have an imaginary as hero, so or they are already hero, or they want to become hero somehow. Okay, so everything in Nike screams the hero journey. Like the logo itself is a wing, simplified of course, but it's a wing, and is, a, is referring to Nike goddess, the goddess of victory. So the brand itself has a name of a goddess of victory, and every spot, every payoff, every claim is definitely connected to the idea of if you wear Nike shoes or clothes, you're going to win. And that's a very strong example of an archetypal brand.
How do you tell the difference between a business who has an identity problem versus a business who has a content problem?
One business that has an identity problem as the core problem, because they can have a lot of content. They can create even funny content and viral content, but they miss the message. Instead, one business who has a content problem, they could have a strong brand identity, but they have no ideas. So they need ideas to create content.
You've talked about the power of a pause and the weight of a word. Now, does a brand also have a certain sound? And how would a podcast help carry that?
That's a very interesting question. And I will give you a structured answer as possible, because my first idea is that to build a very strong brand identity, you have to get involved all the 5 senses. So, and now is the direction that many brands are going to. And I can answer about the podcast in two different ways. So the first thing, when we build a brand identity, you also build a tone of voice of that brand. That means that is like a guideline about how to speak, how to talk, what words you can use and what you cannot. And basically, when you use archetype, is very easy because each archetype has a semantic field of words that you can use. For example, if you use a explorer archetype, explorer is connected to the travel, discovering, adventure. So you use technically this kind of words in your tone of voice. If you have a brand built on Easter, Easter is fun. So you're not obliged to use specific words, but you use irony, or
Satire.
satire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you try to have fun. Okay. So how do you translate this in a tone of voice? You have a list of words you can use, you have a tone you can use, and a way to communicate with others. So in a podcast, for example, if you have a brand that is based on the Easter, you cannot manage a very boring interview, a serious about how depth is that thing. You have to introduce fun and irony to be connected to the archetype. Instead, if you use, I don't know, the wise man, you can go deep because that's the kind of archetype that represents you. And you use the key word that are connected to the archetype. So that's the part that's the part concerning the tone of voice. The other part, and is one of the thing I'm very, very attracted to, is the synesthesia. Because I'm studying and doing research about synesthesia since many years. And I think each brand has the power to communicate through multiple senses, and sound is one of the senses. So there are many brands, like for example, they use Spotify to create playlists, branded playlists, or they have branded jingle, branded music, and that's already a way that they create sound. And the sound is not something that they create from nothing. They start from the story of the brand, and the sound is forcibly connected to the rest of the visual, etc.
I think most of all, when I think of synesthesia, is the Netflix sound. You know exactly what that sounds like when you turn on Netflix. And I've just recently started using Apple TV for the first time, and that has its own similar Netflix sound, but you listen to it and immediately it's kind of like it knocks you in the face. Just, and then you're like, again, I'm like, you've spent time and money developing this very specific sound that's repeated at the start of every show. So you know exactly. And then even goes as far as you talked about the five senses, like smell. I know in America, I think it's Hollister or American Eagle.
Yeah,
Is it Hollister, right?
Abercrombie and Hollister.
Abercrombie, yeah, they have like their own smell, right?
Yeah,
So you go in the store and you
because of the smell.
yeah, I mean, I used to live in America. You would walk by the store, and you just, as soon as you get that whiff of the smell, you know you're walking by that store. And
Yeah.
I think Subway has a very similar thing as well. So it's really using those five senses, and I think that is another big benefit of podcasts. And AI comes up a lot, and people think, oh, people or AI is AI gonna take over podcasting? And I'm just like, no, because people, they connect with people and voices. I've listened to AI podcasts. If they make one mistake in the pronunciation, immediately you've lost all faith and trust in that podcast. You're like, this is not real. People want to hear real people's
Mm.
voices, right? And they want to connect with it.
Yeah, they wanna, because one of the most important thing is to connect really with people. You don't have to show how successful you are, but you have to show your limits. Because if you notice, it's not easy when you start from zero with a, I don't know, a personal brand. You try to express yourself through a personal brand. If you just show your success, you have 30 likes, then 20, then 10, they start to fall down, and they're just your family or and your very close friends, because the success is boring. And people doesn't identify just with the success. They identify with limits and how you can deal with limits to have success. So the same thing is in the podcast. If you're perfect, yeah, you trigger the other in a worse way. I mean, they think, oh, how is perfect? This person speaks very good English. I cannot deal with it. I cannot create a podcast because my English is a very bad. And it's good to share the limit also.
Francesca, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining me
you.
on Vietnam Content Marketing.